This is Martha. I'm a clinical sexologist and relationship counselor, and I've been practiced for 10 years, 10 years in Singapore. And I have a doctorate in human sexuality, master's in counseling, and two other degrees, master's in public policy and management, and also a bachelor of arts in communications. So I started my career working in corporate communications, doing PR, marketing, advertising, and then I went on to do some non-profit work. When the non-profit closed down, I was also doing some volunteer counseling at that point, and I realized that rather than working with the masses, I got so much satisfaction from working with individuals and really addressing what they need at that point when they're in crisis. Sometimes they need information, they need a listening ear, they need support. So I got a lot of pleasure out of helping people, and that's how I decided to focus on having a career in helping people rather than organizations and corporates. And so then I did my doctorate in human sexuality and started my practice. And this was 10 years ago. I'm the only person in Singapore who is an ASEX certified sexuality educator and also ASEX certified sexuality educator supervisor. What this means is I'm accredited by this American Association of Sexuality Educators, Sexuality Counselors, and Sex Therapists. So essentially, it's the biggest governing body regulating the practice of helping professionals who specialize in sexuality in America. And so what this means is that I adhere to their code of ethics, and I believe it's so important to have supervision and governance. And in Singapore, there are lots of people now coming out and calling themselves this and that coach, but actually don't really have the credentials or experience or even training. And so in this video, however, I want to talk a little bit about the importance of pleasure. So May is masturbation month in the US, and I have been doing something every May for almost the last 10 years, every May on masturbation. So when I trained to be a sexologist, I never knew that I would spend so much time talking about it. It's because self-pleasure and masturbation is probably the first way we start to learn about our bodies and pleasure in our bodies. And it's also our first exposure to our sexuality. A lot of my clients who are uncomfortable with their bodies and uncomfortable with having an orgasm, they find that they have difficulties having pleasure and having orgasms with their partners. So I started to do a lot of education around this. And so people ask why May is masturbation month. Many years ago, in the US, there was this Sergeant General called Jocelyn Elders, and she was fired from her job for saying that masturbation is the normal, healthy sexual behavior. And in protest, sex shop Good Vibrations created this masturbation month. And so because of my ASEC certification, and my training in the US, so of course I'm closer to what's happening in the US, and so started to do education around masturbation in May. And so this month I have been doing a virtual event where in a closed group, we talk about the possibilities of pleasuring ourselves for 30 days, for 30 minutes. And in conjunction with Masturbation Month, I'm also putting up 2 workshops that are happening this Saturday in Singapore. The first part is on female sexuality, and then the second part is on male sexuality. So I know I say male and female, but actually not everybody who identifies with male and female have a male or female body. So it's really for people with vulvas and penises. So regardless of your sexual orientation, regardless of your gender, it is open to people of all genders. And in the workshop, I'll be talking about the differences in pleasuring people with these genitals, and a little bit about the differences where people with these body parts prefer to receive pleasure. I know there will be some generalizations that I'll be making, but I'm doing this with the intention of being as useful as I can be. So it's going to be a session talking about the different parts of the sexual anatomy, and also different ways we can pleasure ourselves, and hopefully it can expand your mind on what is possible in our body. So having talked a little bit about myself, and a little bit about Masturbation Month, and also the workshop this Saturday, now I want to talk about why pleasure is so important. Okay. um, I'm Singaporean. I'm a born and bred Singaporean. I may come across as very radical because of what I do, but actually I completely identify with Asians and Asians' values. Obviously, I am Asian, born and bred Singaporean, and I'm very, very much in my head, very in my head, and super love studying. So I have 4 degrees, and I just love learning and studying. It doesn't mean that I have good grades. I just love learning and studying. And so why is pleasure so important? Because there is a lot of suffering. There is a lot of suffering and pain we experience as humans. We go through a lot of shock. We go through a lot of negative emotions like rage, anger, frustration, disappointment, grief. And the opposite of all these negative emotions is is what? is is pleasure, is joy, is happiness, it's feeling orgasm and orgasmic. And we as a society are so scared of our sexuality because we did not receive sex education growing up. And the younger generation, they have some sex education in schools, but for me and people around my age, people in their 40s or mid 30s, most of them did not receive any sex education whatsoever. So if we don't have this knowledge about sex and sexuality, this affects our beliefs, affects the way we act. It affects also the way we think about the importance of pleasure and orgasm. So perhaps those people who are watching this video, you are already the converted, but maybe you are in relationship with a partner who is not. So pleasure is important because pleasure is our birthright. I know when I say this, people don't really understand what it means. What it means is that we were not born to suffer and be unhappy and have grief and hate being alive. That's not that's not why we are here. We are here because we are here to experience the whole facet of what it means to be human. And part of feeling pleasure is actually to heal ourselves that okay, that there is a purpose and reason to be alive. And when we are happy, vibrant, sexy, yummy, juicy people, and we are happy people can help other people. You cannot help other people when you're in despair, anger, frustration, and in depression. You cannot help other people when you're not in a good place. So when you are comfortable with your sexuality and with your body, and you start to claim pleasure as your birthright, what will happen is that you look and show up differently in the world. And when you look different in the world, you can help and support the people around you, and um, to a bigger extent, your community and the rest of humanity. So people who are disempowered, people who are negative, angry, frustrated, they are not going to be able to help other people. It is the people who are brave, who are strong, who are confident, who have done work to heal themselves of their trauma, of their past, of their childhood wounds, of negative conditioning and programming around sex and sexuality, that they can step into their full power as an adult and a human being. So one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about the work that I do is because, and I don't need to do this, I don't need to be a sexologist and be objectified as a woman. I became a sexologist because I felt somebody needed to stand up for positive sexuality. I became a sexologist because I believe that sex is the last frontier of being an adult. We get all kinds of trainings and qualifications around how to drive a car, how to balance your bank book, how to be successful in your trade, your career. But we get very little information about how to embrace our sexuality. And for a lot of people, they don't really step fully into being an adult until they are able to be in a partnered relationship and perhaps if they want to get married and have children. But this is a part of coming into adulthood. It's almost like a rite of passage. So when I have clients who have difficulties being able to have sex because of religious, cultural reasons, because of lack of sex education, it really hurts me because they feel disempowered. And so part of it, instead of talking about have sex, make baby, sure, this may be very important to some people. Let's step one step backwards and talk about being comfortable with pleasure. And so this is the reason why the workshop embracing your pleasure this weekend. So I've just talked a lot about the importance of pleasure, and I'd love to hear from you, your comments. And for those of you who cannot make it for the workshops this Saturday, you can still subscribe to some free content on masturbation. So I created this email series of 7 videos talking about masturbation month. So you can subscribe to the emailer that I have in the link below. But for those of you who are in Singapore, please come for the workshop. It's going to be your chance to meet with me, to interact with me, to learn in a small group, and to really go deep. Because it's one thing to learn from like books and articles, it's another thing to learn from like an online video, it's another thing to learn in person. So this is when you have the real life real-time interaction, and you can better absorb the transmutation, basically the initiation, the information that is being shared. Some people are just much more kinesthetic, and so they learn and remember things better when they are in person. So that is the reason why I still persist in running in-person workshops. A lot of times it's very thankless because I have to book the space, I have to market it, I have to bring things down. It's very tiring. But the reason why I do this is because I love helping people, and I feel that in-person workshops is one of my favorite ways to teach. So this is Martha of Eros Coaching. Check out the workshops this Saturday, and also check out the emailers that you can subscribe to. And if you have any thoughts, comments, you can also leave them below or drop me an email. So this is Martha of Eros Coaching, and have a very good week ahead.